What is up? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here. If you don't already know who I am, my name is Monica Murphy, and today I'm going to be sharing my labor and delivery story with my firstborn son. He's gonna be turning 3 this September, and I can recall filming this video when I was probably like 3 months postpartum, but I, for some reason, don't have it anymore. I think I didn't post it because I was like super self-conscious at that time, and I was worried about what people might think, but I'm filming it again for the same reason I did at that time. And that is because so many of you wanted to know my labor and delivery story with Reece over on Instagram. If you're not yet following on Instagram, I'll drop my handle here. You can hang out over there. We talk motherhood, breastfeeding, body positivity, makeup, all fun things over there. But also, I just wanted it for Reece, for when he's older, and for myself, so that I never forget this day. Honestly, it was one of the hardest, one of the most beautiful days of my entire life, and I know everyone says that, but it was just something so out of this world that I want to remember every single little detail and film this before I forget what happened. So stay tuned. I will do a Linnea version, and it will be a little bit different because she was a scheduled C-section. So before I give too much away, let's get into it. So the reason I came up with wanting to film this today is I was going through some things and I found Reece's baby book, and it reminded me that I have to do Linnea's baby book, and it's totally true. Where your second child, third child, fourth child, apparently you just forget, and it's hard to remember to do these kind of things, but with your firstborn, like every little thing they do, you write it down. So I spent so long on his baby book. There's like so much good stuff in here, and right on this page it says welcome to the world, and I have a few pictures, which I'll throw up some pictures as I'm talking so you can have a visual for my story. But this is like the quick version of what happened that day, and I just glanced over it and I remember every single little detail. Like, I remember Reece's birthday like it was yesterday. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Name, Reece John Murphy, born September 1st, 2019 at 8:50 p.m. at Royal Columbian Hospital, which is in British Columbia. His weight was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. His height was 20.9 inches, and head circumference was 35.5 centimeters. So I will back it up to when I first started having signs of labor, which was 4 days before my due date and 4 days before I gave birth to Reece. So I had Reece on his due date, which I believe they said it was 4% of babies are born on their due date. I was not expecting it at all. I was like hoping and praying that he was gonna come as soon as possible because I could not wait to meet him. But I, in my head, told myself that I could very well go past my due date, because a lot of mamas do, especially with their first babies. But 4 days before my due date, I went with my sister-in-law to get a reflexology foot massage. And if you don't know what this is, it wasn't the foot massage that I was expecting. It was pushing on pressure points at the bottom of my foot, and like it really hurt. And I remember the foot massage guy was like, oh, I'll stay away from the labor inducing pressure point. And my sister-in-law was like, no, push on that. Like, let's get some shit going. And I was so scared. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's just been like told that pushing this point of your foot may, you know, get your uterus contracting and you could start going into labor soon. And I'm like, okay, what the heck? Like, I'm 4 days out, I'm ready, push on my feet wherever my uterus lines up. And so it really hurt. I didn't notice anything at the time, but right after that foot massage, we went out for lunch, and I went to the washroom and I had lost my mucus plug. So it was probably just coincidence that he pushed on my foot, and then literally like an hour later, I lost my mucus plug. You can't miss that. I know this, not everyone loses their mucus plug, or maybe they don't notice it, or losing your mucus plug can be a sign of labor, but then it can also just like close your uterus up again and you build more mucus. So when I saw that sign, I was really excited, but I didn't get my hopes too far up because I still wasn't too sure. That was like my only sign that I had. So lost my mucus plug in the restaurant. I came back to the table to my sister-in-law. I was so happy. I'm like, I just lost my mucus plug. And then we went to my in-laws for a nice dinner, relaxed. And then over like the next 4 days, I just didn't really have any other signs. And so, you know, I was like, darn it. Like I was really excited about this. I was staying active. I was doing some labor-inducing things like bouncing on the exercise ball. I was drinking that, what is a tea called? Raspberry leaf tea or something? I can't remember, but I was drinking some sort of tea that apparently could induce labor. I was eating spicy foods. I was going for lots of walks. And I'll never forget, September 1st, it was a Sunday. It was my due date. I woke up at 7 in the morning and I was just having some like period cramps. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, this is exciting. And I remember not waking my husband up because they were not painful at all. And I actually got up and I had a shower and I shaved my legs and I did my makeup and I did my hair. As I was in the shower and as I was doing my makeup, I just kept feeling these period type cramps coming and going. And I had downloaded a contractions app a few weeks before that. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna start timing these because they are coming and I can feel when they start and I can feel when they stop. So why not just time them? So I was timing them and I was doing my hair and my husband was sleeping. And then probably like 10 minutes or I don't know, it was probably like 20 minutes after I had started timing my contractions that I got a notification from the contractions app that it was time to start packing my bags and get ready to go to the hospital. And I remember being like, okay, no, like this app is wrong. I know I don't need to go to the hospital. I'm not in pain at all. No. But I did get really excited by that and I went in and woke up my husband and I was just lying beside him and I like rubbed his head and I was like, babe, like I'm having some like cramps. He's like, no, like really? Is it just in your head because it's your due date? You just want him here so bad? And I was like, no, like I can time these. Back up a little bit. I had a doctor, not a midwife, throughout my pregnancy. That is just where I decided to go. I asked my family doctor if I should do a doctor or a midwife, and he just said because of my mom's history, and he would recommend me going to a doctor. My mother had 4 C-sections, 2 emergency, and then the last 2 were scheduled. And I know that like really has nothing to do with my labor and my birth. I could very well give natural birth. Just because my mom gave a C-section does not mean that I'm gonna give a C-section, but it was just like written down there that my mom had 2 emergency C-sections. I saw the most amazing doctor. He was phenomenal. And I also wanted to get a doula. And if you don't know what a doula is, I'll pop that up on a screen right here. But pretty much it is like the spiritual and the encouragement that you need in labor that is like the motivation of another woman, usually that can be there with you through labor. And I knew that since my doctor was a doctor and he was a male and my husband was a male, I just wanted like a woman in the room. And I wanted a woman who has pushed a baby out in the room so she can be like, I've been here, I got you. And so I hired a doula. And so I texted my doula that morning after I woke my husband up and I just said like, hey, I'm having some period cramps that like are coming and going. I just wanted to let you know. And she was like, wow, that's amazing. Why don't you get up and go for a walk? And you know, if this is real labor coming, it might speed some things up. And if it's not real labor, well, you went for a nice walk on a Sunday morning with your husband. And I was like, okay, like that sounds good. So it's so funny, I like got ready, did my hair and makeup, but then I put on my husband's, I remember what I was wearing, his big orange shorts and a lacrosse shirt of his, like a huge big baggy shirt. And we went for a little walk. That is when things really started to speed up. And so we have this like beautiful trail where we used to live, and we did the same loop that we always would do. And I actually remember running into one of my girlfriend's mums in the trail. And she was like, oh my gosh, Monica, like, I'm so excited for you. Isn't your due date near? And I was like, it's today. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, so when do you think? And I was like, I think like today. And she's like, what? I'm like having some stuff going on. And she's like, oh my gosh, well, good luck. And I'm not kidding you. During this walk, I went from my pain and my contractions that were coming from like, they were probably like a 2 in pain on the pain scale. From when I got to like halfway to my walk, I was at like a 5 or a 6. So they started to get more intense. They started to come more frequently, and there was a few contractions on our walk where I had to stop, and I remember holding on to like a pole by this high school, and I had to like just like breathe and hold on to the pole. And my husband was like, oh my gosh, like is this real? Like it's happening that fast? And I'm like, yes, like it's happening that fast. So we got home from our walk, and I texted my doula and I was like, hey, like I think things are speeding up. My contractions are a little bit more intense. They're coming about every 4 minutes right now, and they're lasting like 45 seconds. And she was like, that's amazing. Why don't you get in the bath, and I'm gonna head over and see how you're doing in a little bit here. And I was like, okay. So I got in the bath, and I'm not kidding you. I love baths. I didn't last 10 minutes in the bath. I absolutely hated it. And I know so many women love to labor in the bath, and I don't know what it was. I feel like the bath in our old apartment was just like really small, so I couldn't get comfortable. But also like it was September 1st, okay? It was summer, it was hot, and like it just wasn't comfortable for me. I felt like when I was having a contraction, I just wanted to like do whatever I wanted with my legs and my arms, and I felt constricted. Like I felt like I couldn't contract the way that I wanted to. So after about 4 contractions, I was like, to hell with this, I'm out of the bath. Like I dried off, and I was on the bed. I remembered to wear a pad because I had watched a YouTube video of some doula explaining that once you go into labor, you should wear a pad in case your water breaks. You can test the pad for amniotic fluid and like other things. So after I got out of the bath, I put on underwear and a pad, and that was it. And I just laid on the bed with my husband, and we were watching Friends, and I was having contractions, and they were getting more and more intense. And so now it was about 1:30. So I started having my very first contractions at 7 in the morning when they were like at 2. We went for a walk probably around like 9:30, 10, had my bath around like 12. And now I'm in the bed at like 1:30, watching Friends, just trying to put something to distract me, and just lying there with my husband. And honestly, it was such beautiful moments. My husband was just like rubbing my back, helping me through it. And that is when we got out the TENS machine. And so the TENS machine is something that my doula lent me. And if you don't know what it is, I'll put a description here, but pretty much it sends like electric waves, shocks, to whatever area that you apply it. And it's supposed to just like contradict what's going on, to just take your mind off of the contractions in your tummy. So I applied them to my back, and they were on full blast. Every time I had a contraction, my husband would push the buttons, and it would like, I don't know how to explain it. These TENS would go onto my back, and that is what was getting me through those contractions. I loved it. I loved the TENS machine. I didn't love the contractions, okay? But 1:50, my doula arrives, and she's just like, hey, like I'm just gonna observe, like pretend I'm not here. Just like do your thing. And so she was like in the back of the room, and I was having my contractions, and after like 3, she was like, I just want to ask, like, do you have to moan through those contractions? Like, do you feel like they're that painful that that's what you have to do? And I was like, yeah, like I have to moan through them. Like I was already at that point where I just felt like I had to breathe through them and like do whatever my body wanted to do, which was like this moaning noise. And so she's like, that's amazing. Like, that's great. And so doulas aren't like midwives. So she would never like check me to see how dilated I was. She was just going off of, you know, what I was doing in my labor to kind of judge what was going on. She was not even there for 10 minutes when I was having a contraction. And I remember this moment, I'll never forget it. During my contraction, I felt Reece kick me, and my water broke all over the bed. Literally all over the bed, like the movies. Okay, I have heard other women that's just like their water breaks and it's just like a little trickle. I felt a gush of water all over my bed come out of me as I was contracting. It was really intense. And I remember like screaming as it was happening. I'm like, my water just broke. And she's like, that's amazing. Like, things are happening. That's great. And I remember being like a little bit nervous because after your water breaks, I have heard that things can start to speed up and get a little bit more intense. And that is exactly what happened. So my water broke at 2 p.m. And I remember my doula was like, hey, like, let's go sit on the toilet because now every contraction, you're probably gonna be leaking some fluids. And I was like, okay. So I probably sat on the toilet for like 5 minutes and I had probably 3 contractions in that time. And I remember looking at my husband and I'm like, it's time to go. Like, these are bad. It's time to go to the hospital. He was like, okay. I found this out later that my doula looked at my husband right after I told him that I wanted to go to the hospital and was like, it's okay. Like, we're just gonna stay here. Don't rush. It's fine. And after I found that out, like, I was mad because I knew my body and I just knew that it was time for me to go to the hospital. And I understand that like so many moms in labor, especially new moms, will go to the hospital and they get sent home and they're not dilated and they'll get sent home. And like, it was a bit of a drive to the hospital, but I knew that it was time to go to the hospital. And so when I looked at my husband and I was like, it's time to go. And she was like, just walk, slow down, slowly back the car out. I didn't know at the time that that happened, but like he told me later, I was a little upset. Got the car, brought it up, and I remember getting in the car and having the worst contractions. And it was probably about a 15-minute drive to the hospital. Thank goodness it was a Sunday and there was no traffic. They were bad. The car contractions, they were not fun. Like I was holding on to the handle and it kind of was like the bath. Like I just couldn't be in the position that my body wanted to be in while I was contracting. And it was so weird. In between every contraction, I was totally normal, could talk, like felt totally fine, but as the contractions were coming, they were getting more and more intense. So we pulled up to the hospital. My husband got a great parking spot, like really close to the doors, and we got to the hospital just in time. And when I say that, I mean that my contractions went from a 7 to a 10 in that amount of time, like from parking and walking into the hospital. You're supposed to go check in an emergency. I walked through the front doors. I grabbed onto the first thing that I saw. I still had my TENS machine in my hand and I like bared down and I was holding onto, it was like a hand sanitizer station. And I was holding on and I was screaming, and my word of choice in labor was fuck. I would say, fuck. And I would hold that word and say it. That's just what came out. I couldn't control it. That's just what was happening. And so I leaned over on that hand sanitizer station and I was like, ah. And the people in emergency kind of looked over and they're like, just bring her upstairs. My husband was like, okay, thank you. I didn't want to wait in this line. So we went straight up to labor and delivery. And again, in between contractions, I was totally normal. Went in the elevator. I was like, oh my gosh, like these are really intense, Murph. My husband's name's Murph. My husband's name's Andrew. Call him Murph. And we walked into labor and delivery, which they knew I was coming. I think when we were leaving, my doula just called and said that we were going to be arriving. And I had that pad on. So right when I got there, I walked up to the desk and they were like, hi, like, what's your name? And I looked around for something to bear down on again. And there was like a photocopy machine. Yeah, I was right on it, just like hunched over, fuck. And they were like, oh, yeah, she's good. Get her a room. She's coming right in. And so we went into the like entry room, like before you get a room, and they checked my pad. And that is when they found out that my son had pooed in me. It's a nicer word to say it. I don't know anymore what it's called. Pneumonia? Pneumonia? Pneumonia. I don't know. There's a word for it. And they let me know that that was detected in my water and that he could be stressed, but like they're just gonna monitor it. So this is where things get really fun. And I'll never forget. I'm contracting in the like entryway, which there's 4 beds and there's just like a curtain between. And my contractions were so intense at this point. Like I was losing control. I was screaming that word of choice every contraction. My doula and everyone was trying to like get me to breathe through it. I had laughing gas that honestly just made me feel really claustrophobic and I didn't want it. And I remember one point in this entryway curtain where my doula was like rubbing my arm through a contraction and I snapped at her. I was like, don't touch me like that. I don't like that. And she's like, oh my God, no worries. Like if I'm doing something you don't like, you tell me. And I'm like, I will. Do not rub my arm like that. Like, no. I didn't even know what I wanted at that point, but I knew that I wanted some sort of medication, some sort of drugs to help me through. My contractions were a 10 at this point. And so they did check me and I was 3 centimeters dilated, but I went from a 3 to a 5 in minutes from the second they checked me, and they gave me laughing gas. And I said that that wasn't working. They were gonna give me some morphine, but me and my little old veins, they could not get the IV in my hand. They tried here, they tried here, they tried here. I had about 4 nurses poking me about 8 different times, and it got to a point where my husband looked like he was in tears, and he looked at the nurse and he was like, please, like, help her. Like, did you get it this time? Like, please get someone who's experienced to know to hit the vein, like, please. Like, he saw how much pain that I was in, and he just like wanted so badly. Every time they poked, like, I would look at his face and I'm like, did it go in? And he's like, did it go in? No, fuck, it didn't go in. It took 4 nurses and still no one could find a vein to get me any sort of medication or fluids. And so that is when they called up the anesthesiologist. They called up the big guy who is very experienced in this, and he gives epidurals. And right when he came up and saw me, he was like, do you want an epidural? And I was like, yes. And he was like, all right, like, you're ready, like, it's time. And so I never even got an IV. They went straight to epidural, and by that point I was 5 centimeters dilated. The epidural was amazing. I have no regrets in getting my epidural. Everything worked great. I did not feel anything when I was getting the epidural. The hardest part for me was as I was contracting. At this point, I wanted to sway and scream my word of choice. And the doctor, like the anesthesiologist guy, was like, when I give you the epidural, you cannot move. Like, if you're having contraction, you can't move. And I'm like, I can't help it. Like, I actually can't help it. I was crying. I'm like, I can't help what I do. And he was like, okay, I'm gonna try to time it in between contractions. He timed it perfectly. Everything was great. And I got my epidural, and within minutes, I felt a huge amount of pain gone, and everything I thought was gonna be great at that point. A few contractions after that, I remember like feeling pressure again, and I told the nurse, I'm like, am I supposed to be feeling, you know, something? And she's like, yes, like, that's the perfect epidural. If you can feel a little bit of pressure when you're contracting, you're gonna know when to push. Like, this is the perfect epidural. I'm like, okay, great. So I had my epidural sitting there, and I remember my doula was like, okay, so like, looked at my husband, she's like, do you wanna go grab a coffee or something to eat? And he was like, no, like, I'm not even hungry. That shit was so stressful. Like, I'm just gonna chill here with Monica. And she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get a muffin or something. And so she left the room. And I'm so glad it was her instead of my husband, because right then I had all the alarms start going off and a bunch of nurses start running in. And I just knew that, like, my baby's heart just flatlined. I could just hear what was going on from the monitors, and it was really scary. My husband's face went white. Bunch of nurses ran in, and they were just like rolling me on my sides, trying to like move the baby and find a position where he was comfortable in to get a heartbeat. And they found a heartbeat while I was like, it was the weirdest position. I was like on my side, I had a peanut ball between my legs, and I was just really twisted up, and they were like, okay, like, stay here. And as that was already going on, they had called my doctor to just tell them, like, baby's heart kind of stopped. And this happened, I think, 3 different times. Baby's heart would stop and I would roll again, and it was really, really scary. And it was kind of flashbacks, not flashbacks, but very similar to my mom's story, where when she went into labor, baby's heart stopped. And so the same kind of thing was happening. And we already knew that the baby pooed in me, so he was maybe stressed, and then this was happening. So when my doctor arrived, he was so quick. He was there within like 10 minutes. He looked at my like chart of the baby's heart rate, and I just like saw his face, and he looked at me, he's like, we're gonna do a C-section right now. And it was like so serious. And my doula was like, can we get a second opinion? And I'm so here for second opinions, and like, I knew that she wanted to help me experience the birth story that I wanted, which was vaginally. But in that moment, I looked at her and I just said, I trust my doctor. I don't need a second opinion. And she was like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, yes, I'm sure. My husband got suited up, and right then we were wheeling down into the emergency. It was like, I didn't even have a second to try to understand that that's what was about to happening. It was just, it all happened so quick. Sorry, let's just do a little time break here. First contractions at 7 a.m. Water broke at 2 p.m. 5 p.m. I got my epidural, and 8 o'clock we were p.m. rolling down to the emergency room to have a C-section. I remember messaging my family group chat and I'm like, it's time, like I'm having a C-section, I'm going in right now. And the C-section itself was very scary. I was so exhausted from labor, and I did not know what to expect, like the feeling of all that they were doing. But my husband was there the entire time beside me. And I remember just like the tugging feeling, and all that I can explain it to be like is when you're getting a tooth pulled out and you're numb. Like you can't feel the pain of the tooth coming out, but you can feel the tugging and the wiggling. That is what it felt like. And it felt like an hour. It wasn't that long, but it felt really long. And yeah, 8:50 p.m. I remember they were like, are you ready? Like, he's coming. And I just started bawling my eyes out. And they're like, try not to cry, because I was like shaking my belly when I was crying. And they brought him out and they showed us him over the little curtain, and he was so perfect, and he was purple and crying right away. And it was like the best moment of my life. And they brought him over and got him weighed, and my husband cut the umbilical cord, and then they brought him over to me, and I was just like snuggling him. He was so perfect. He had the cutest little nose. And yeah, that was at 8:50 p.m. I learned my second C-section that I could have advocated for myself for them not to take my son away from me. But at this point, I did not know. And I had been in labor all day, so tired, just had a surgery, had anesthesia. I don't know how to explain it, but they separated me from my baby. And I remember crying, and thank goodness my husband slipped my phone under my pillow. So I had my phone while I was in recovery all alone, and I could not stop texting my husband. I just said, how is he? And he's like, he's good, like he's with me. I remember I was so annoying in that room. I just kept telling the nurse that I had to be with my baby. When can I see my baby? And she was like, when you can like lift your bum off the ground. And I shot my ass off the ground right then. And she's like, okay, like, no, it's 45-minute minimum. And I'm like, I want to be with my baby. Like, I was gonna like cause a big scene. I was really upset. There should be no reason where you're separated from your baby unless the baby needs like direct help, or the mom does. But I was totally fine. My baby was healthy. He was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. And like, I wanted to breastfeed. And it was like a whole 45 minutes where I was separated from him, which isn't that long, but it is, because it just is. So anyways, I remember getting wheeled out of the recovery room, and just as I turned the corner, I saw my mom and dad sitting there, and they were just waving at me, and I started crying. And I was like, I haven't even seen him. And they're like, it's okay, like, we're just here because like you had a surgery, you want to be here. Oh, that part makes me so sad. I don't know why. Just like so grateful to have them, and like it was just different than the second time. Oh my God. Because when I had Linnea, it was like during COVID, and you know, my parents couldn't be there. So it was just a really special memory to like get wheeled out of that room and just see them there, like waiting there for me. And they're like, just take all the time you need, like go be with your baby and your husband. And I went in, and I was so tired, and I was so happy to like finally see Reece, and he was just snuggling Murph. And my doula was there just like helping my husband do skin to skin with him. And then I finally got to breastfeed and let my mom and dad in. And my little sister came from the club. She was like partying downtown, and she showed up in her little clubbing outfit or something. I remember she looked so good, and I looked like shit. And it was just like the best day of my life. Honestly, it was so like a dream, the whole thing. And although it did not go the way that I had planned, it was the best story for us, and I know it was the right decision, and I have zero regrets. Reece is like the cutest, like funniest guy. He's 2.5 now, and he's just growing up to be like the most amazing son, and he's so great with Linnea. He's such a good big brother. So yeah, that was my birth story with Reece. We stayed at the hospital for 4 days. It was really hard learning to breastfeed at the beginning. I've shared about this tons over on my Instagram, but maybe I'll do like a whole breastfeeding video if that's something that you guys are interested in. The C-section was honestly a blessing in my breastfeeding journey aspect because I was with a lactation consultant every day for 4 days. She was helping me pump and breastfeed and positions and all the things that I had no idea what I was doing. Give him colostrum. And so yeah, we brought him home on September 4th back home, and it was just the best ever. So that is my birth story with little Reece. He came on his due date, and I'll share some more pictures, but like the best day ever. So how cute is this book, by the way? 3 months, 2 months, I have to finish it. Look at these holiday celebrations. I got this baby book on Amazon. I can link it in the description if you are looking for a baby book. But that is my labor and delivery story with Reece. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to press the notification bar to be notified anytime that I post a video. And I would love if you joined my Instagram and TikTok family. I will put the links to those in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna go hug my son. See you guys.